Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Black Mental Health Matters. I'm drkerryann Williams, and I'm a psychiatrist practicing right here in Massachusetts. And this is a talk show that's about everything related to mental wellness in the Black community. And today, it's all about seasonal mood changes. Yes, if you want to participate during today's show, you can drop a comment on Facebook. This is going to be available on Facebook on the page for heat981fm.com and also my Facebook page at Dr. Carrie Ann. This is a pre recorded show, so you won't be able to call in. Okay, but let's get into the show for today. So, does your mood change based on the season? Do you get the winter blues? It's not just in your head. Winter can actually change our mood. And today I'm going to get into that. So, long stretches of bad weather can change your mood. And the technical term for it is seasonal affective disorder, or SAD. Most commonly, it starts in the fall when the weather starts to get colder and gloomier and the days get shorter. So there's less daylight. And this means that it's more common in areas where I am, New England, um, versus in the southern states where it's less common. And interestingly, some people have the opposite pattern where instead of getting more depressed in the winter, they actually have a worse mood in the spring and summer. So that can happen as well. But the most common type is the winter depression. So do you notice that you get depressed every winter, but you feel better every spring and summer? You may have a seasonal depression, but how can you know if you're truly depressed? Now, some people just get the winter blues, but if you want to know if you have a true depression, here are some of the signs of a depression. First, irritability. Do you find yourself suddenly starting to snap at other people? Do you feel really annoyed when other people look happy and upbeat? Are you thinking, what are they so happy about? Because depression or unhappiness is often revealed in irritability. Do you tend to get tearful or emotional? Do you tend to feel more sensitive in the winter? That could be a sign that your emotions are feeling just a little bit off kilter, and it could be due to seasonal changes. Um, Now, what about a change in sleep? Do you find that in the winter it's more difficult to get a good night's sleep? Do you find that you're waking up early in the morning and that it's hard for you to get back to sleep? Or do you find that you're even just sleeping a lot more than usual? You just feel tired all the time. You could sleep forever, you know. Um, Maybe you're going into that hibernation mode. When the weather starts to get really cold, and the days get short, that's what happens. We kind of just feel like hibernating. And for some of us, it affects us more than other people. So if you notice that there are changes in your sleep, you're sleeping more than usual or less than usual, it could be that your body systems are just feeling a bit off because of the seasonal changes. Other ways that you can tell if that you're having a depression is whether or not you still enjoy the things that you used to enjoy. Um, the activities, the hobbies, do they start to feel meaningless? Do they start to feel empty? You may even ask yourself, why am I even doing this? Um, I would say that one of the worrisome things is when you start to even worry about your job and you think, well, why am I doing this? I don't really get meaning out of this anymore. When your job just feels like going through the motions, that could mean that you're just feeling a lot less motivated, less inspired, and you could be sinking into a depression potentially. It sometimes starts this way, where it starts off with this feeling of meaninglessness, um, and lack of enjoyment in things. You may even feel less creative or not even really want to go out anymore for walks. just don't feel like cooking, you don't feel like doing anything. That could be a winter depression. Then here's one you might not have thought about. Depression has a way of making us think very pessimistically. Have you noticed that when the weather gets like this, kind of cold and gloomy, and um, that you start to feel more feelings of like guilt and regret and blame and shame? Um, you could be sinking into that pessimism that can come along with depression. You can start to get lost in negative thoughts and negative memories. You might start to kind of focus on things that you regret, focus on things that you blame yourself for. Um, and in some cases, people even start to feel like they're a burden to other people, that people would be kind of better off without them. That can lead to some social isolation as well. But this feeling, that this thought that depression tells you, this idea that people don't like you or that people don't need you or that you're better off not being around them, it's a false belief. It's a lie. Depression tends to make everything seem gloomier than it actually is. Um, and you can be prone to that when it's the winter and you feel isolated and cold and unhappy. So other changes that may be due to a winter depression could be a change in energy. And this is, I think, what most people might identify with. A lot of people experience this. Most commonly, it's a decrease in energy. Do you feel like your energy is lower in the winter? You just feel kind of tired. You don't feel like doing anything. This low energy can contribute to that feeling of not wanting to do anything, like I mentioned before, where you just kind of feel like you're going through the motions. Nothing feels exciting anymore. You're not enjoying anything anymore. Sometimes that is because of the low energy, but it's more than just the low energy. Okay. Um, but it can also lead to that decrease in motivation, that the desire. Because sometimes you might have a desire to do something, but you just don't have the energy to do it. When people are depressed, they often lose both the desire and the energy. Okay. And so what can happen is, um, with that low energy, you may end up doing things like spending hours watching Netflix, or just scrolling on social media. You don't have the full amount of energy to be really productive, but you may not be tired enough to actually want to sleep. So you can just get caught up with surfing the internet, or watching TV for long periods of time. And it's like this weird in between middle where you end up wasting a lot of time because of that low energy and that low motivation to do anything else. In some cases, people feel like a restless energy instead of a low energy, and that can feel very uncomfortable. But with a seasonal depression, it's more likely to be that low energy, that feeling of fatigue. Now, going along with that, people who have a winter depression may also have problems focusing. They can get this kind of like brain fog. We don't always think about that as a sign of depression, but it can be. Um, so you have to ask yourself the question, do you have difficulty sustaining attention on tasks? You start working on something, but then you can't really persist with it. Your mind goes elsewhere. You fatigue of the activity very quickly and your mind starts to drift. This can get worse in the winter, right? And maybe some of it is the poor sleep as well. Maybe some of it is a low motivation. But either way, those problems with focus can sometimes be a sign of depression. But there are a lot of reasons why people may have trouble concentrating or focusing. So just that poor concentration by itself is not necessarily meaning that a person is depressed, but depression often does come along with this difficulty focusing. Here's another one to think about for a winter depression: changes in your appetite. So, very often, depression leads to a loss of appetite. So, you may find your clothes fitting more loosely, and that can happen too. You just feel too tired to really prepare meals, or, your body systems are just feeling off. But with a winter depression, a seasonal depression, what is most common is actually the opposite of appetite loss. It is eating more than you normally would. People might tend to eat mindlessly. So they are snacking on foods throughout the day and night, consuming more than they normally would. Often it's carbohydrate rich foods, junk foods, processed foods. And these are things that then can lead to weight gain because if you're eating more and you're less active, you could then gain weight in the winter due to that winter slump. So pay attention to those changes in your appetite in the winter. Again, in and of itself doesn't necessarily mean you're depressed, but these are some of the things that can come along with depression. And a lot of times people think of depression as just the mood. Well, I don't feel sad, therefore I can't be depressed. But the truth is that depression is actually a collection of things, not just sadness. It affects your sleep, your energy, your appetite, your thought pattern, your ability to tolerate stress, your ability to tolerate other people. It affects a lot of things, and that's what makes a depression kind of different from just feeling, I guess, the blues. So the last couple of things that I'll say about how to recognize depression. And here's one that's really, really important. So I want you to pay attention, and that is hopelessness. Hopelessness. If you are at a point where things lack meaning to the point where you think, why bother? You may be feeling a sense of hopelessness. And that's definitely a sign that it's time for you to get help, for you to see somebody. If you are at a point where you're feeling like, why bother being alive, or people would be better off without me, you need to talk to someone, okay? It's very serious. This is not the winter blues anymore. You need to get connected with people in your life that will take you seriously. You need to tell your primary care doctor, um, find a mental health counselor. And if you are feeling suicidal, you can call 911 or you can Google for a suicide hotline. One of the national suicide hotlines is 1-800-273-8255. Okay. And try not to be alone because isolation is not a good idea when you're feeling hopeless. Okay. And so the other thing I wanted to mention, just going along with the isolation thing, is in the winter, there is a tendency for many of us, but particularly those that are struggling with a winter depression, to start to feel like they don't really want to be around other people. So they start to withdraw socially during the colder months. Maybe some of it is not wanting to go outside when it's cold and just feeling comfortable being inside where it's warm and cozy. Just that inertia of, oh, I don't want to have to go out there. There's some of that. However, I think it's important for you to push yourselves and just do it. Now, again, the pandemic has made this a challenge because you've got to socially distance yourself from other people, and so you may not be physically spending time with them. Push yourself to video call or phone call or text or those sorts of things, but don't isolate because that will not make things better and it could make things worse. So these are some of the things to look for to tell if you may be struggling with a seasonal depression. Yes, guys, it's real. Sometimes your mood can literally worsen because of a change in weather, but a prolonged change in weather, like a season, not just necessarily a day. And if you're just joining, you're listening to Black Mental Health Matters. I'm Dr. Carryann Williams, and today I'm talking about seasonal depression. And if you want to participate in today's show, you can go to our Facebook page, or this is streaming on the Facebook page for heat981fm.com, but also on my Facebook page at Dr. Carryann. That's drkerryann. And this is a pre-recorded show, so you won't be able to call in, but I will be able to answer your questions on Facebook when you post them. So, you may be wondering, what causes seasonal depression? Is it just the weather? You know, how can a change in weather affect your mood? How is that even possible? Well, there are a few theories on this. And I want you to think back to the show that I had a couple weeks ago on sleep. Okay, if you want to, you can go back and listen to that show or watch that show on my website, drkerryann.net, and click on past shows. But I had a show on sleep a couple weeks ago, and I spoke in that show about the body's internal sleep clock. It's called the circadian clock or the circadian rhythm. Okay, and this circadian rhythm is influenced by daylight. Daylight. In the winter, the days are short, so there's less daylight. But but not only are the days themselves short, the even during the period of daylight that we have, there's often just less sunny days. So often, even with a short day that we have, it's cloudy and it's gloomy, and sometimes it's snowing or raining or it's just gray. So in total, there is just less sun overall. Okay. And there is this influence that it will have in disrupting that circadian rhythm or circadian clock because that circadian rhythm is heavily influenced by daylight. So when you don't have daylight, that clock can be thrown off. And there's a connection between the disruption of the circadian clock or the circadian rhythm and feelings of depression, right? There's a connection between your circadian rhythm and your mood. When your body's biological rhythm is thrown off, then one of the most common things that happens is a change in mood. And this goes for many things, actually. Many things that have the power to throw off your body's biological rhythms also have the power to influence your mood, most often causing a depression or an anxiety. And it's the case with this as well. When there's changes in the amount of daylight, it changes our circadian rhythm, and that has a power to influence our mood as well. Now, I'm going to go over a couple of things because there's a couple of kind of like chemicals that are involved in the body when it comes to this. And one is that there's a theory that serotonin levels are influenced by daylight. And serotonin is that chemical, it's a neurochemical that basically is involved with a few things. Serotonin it regulates our mood, it regulates our sleep, it regulates our appetite, it regulates our energy level, and it's involved in our digestive system. So whenever serotonin is off, people sometimes have nausea, they sometimes have diarrhea or constipation if your serotonin levels are off. And they have changes in energy and appetite and mood, um, being sad or anxious. Serotonin is involved with all of those things, right? Which is why most antidepressants target serotonin. Now, serotonin levels are also influenced by daylight, or so the theory goes. Okay. And so, if the amount of daylight that we have changes, that will influence your serotonin levels and therefore could cause you to experience depression and changes in sleep and energy and appetite and these sorts of things. So, this is one of the reasons why a change in daylight can actually cause a change in mood. Now, there's also another chemical. It's a hormone called melatonin. And again, if you go back to the show I had on sleep, I talk about melatonin. Melatonin is a hormone, and it's produced by your body, and it helps to regulate your sleep. So as the day goes on, your body will steadily produce higher and higher levels of melatonin until eventually it crosses over into a threshold where it tells your body it's time to wind down and sleep. So the melatonin level in your body gives a signal to your body that it's time to wind down and sleep. So if the levels are really high, you're going to feel tired and sleepy. If the levels are low, you're going to feel alert and it's going to be hard for you to fall asleep at night. And the melatonin levels are very, very much influenced by daylight. So if their daylight is out of whack, your melatonin levels are going to be out of whack. And so you may find that either you don't get that signal saying it's time to sleep, so you can't sleep at night, or you're feeling tired all the time. The good thing is that if the levels are low, you can actually go to the store and buy melatonin, right? So your body makes it, but it's also available for purchase. with modern science. And so you can go and purchase melatonin at the store and help to bump up those levels to cross that threshold and tell your body, hey, time to sleep. Okay. So that's one kind of theory about why changes in weather and changes in sunlight and all of that can actually influence our mood. Okay. So the other things to kind of think about, right? So one is, of course, directly how the weather can actually influence our mood, but there are a few other things to think about, and one is family history, right? So we're going into a little bit of genetics, family history. If you have a family member, a close relative, so talking about like a sibling or a parent um, that has depression, has bipolar disorder, or any other kind of significant mental health issue, you may have a higher risk yourself of having mood changes. And the number one kind of thing is depression, right? So if your parent had depression or bipolar disorder, you may be at risk of depression, and therefore at risk for seasonal depression. And some people have depression kind of anytime, but in the winter season it's worse. That would be a seasonal change to a pre-existing depressive disorder, right? So in any case, depression could run in your family, and if it does, you have a higher risk of having a seasonal depression. If you yourself have already been diagnosed with depression even prior to this, you also have a higher risk of having a seasonal worsening of your kind of underlying depression. Okay. There's also like social and environmental factors that can make it more likely that you'll have a winter depression. So, of course, things like stress. A lot of times people are working really hard in the winter. I don't know if you've noticed this, but I've noticed a pattern where in the summer months, certain kinds of things slow down because a lot of people are taking vacations. And in the winter, where people are less likely to take extended vacations, there's a lot of going on. People are working really hard. They're working very long hours. There's a lot of staying indoors and being productive. And that can create a lot of stress. And that can also increase your risk of depression. Okay. Also, particularly relevant to our community and the Black community, experiences of racism um, can also create a physiological stress, which can predispose us to depression. And whereas we've been kind of living with that for years, um, depending on the particular social climate and political climate, sometimes these factors can increase and decrease over time in terms of how much they stress us. And this can be a factor in the winter as well. And believe me, there, of course, has been a lot in the news for us all to be stressed out about in the last several months. But other things, including like sexism and poverty, these are all things that can increase your risk of depression because it causes a stress on the body. Uh, Trauma, substance abuse, um, other diagnoses, anxiety, PTSD, exposure to domestic violence, community violence. These things can all cause stress on the body, which can predispose us to having depression and therefore a seasonal depression. Okay. So those are some of the things that can cause us to possibly experience a winter depression. You may be wondering, hey, I think I have that. What should I do about it? Right? If you think that the thing kind of describes you, that you may be experiencing a seasonal depression, let's talk about what you can do to help address a seasonal depression. So, stay away from substances, particularly alcohol. I've spoken about this on several occasions. A lot of people gravitate towards alcohol as a way to cope with seasonal depression, particularly because alcohol is something people can have in the privacy of their homes. No one may know that they're drinking, or they may not know how much they're drinking. It's very accessible, and sometimes it seems more benign than it actually is, but alcohol makes depression worse. So please resist a temptation to solve this problem with alcohol or other substances. Then the first I guess the second thing, because the first thing is don't drink. And the second thing is make an appointment with your primary care doctor to get checked out for medical problems. Okay. You want to rule out any medical problems that could also be causing you to feel depressed in the winter. Okay. So, in particular, you want to check for like vitamin deficiencies or nutritional deficiencies. Many people who live in winter climates where the daylight is short and it's less sunny, guess what they tend to lack? Vitamin D. Vitamin D. So it's a simple thing. You can go to the doctor and have your vitamin D levels checked because a low vitamin D level can cause low energy and low mood. And so you may need to actually have a vitamin D supplement added to your daily regimen. And here's the thing: is it may not solve everything. You may not like take the vitamin D and suddenly kind of magically feel better. However, a low vitamin D level could be contributing in a significant way to the mood problem. So at least replacing your vitamin D helps to eliminate that factor as a potential cause. And you can kind of get that squared away and say, okay, I know my vitamin D levels are better, so let's look into what else, right? Now, some people may be deficient in vitamin B12 or in iron, okay? Deficiencies in vitamin B12 definitely will cause you to feel tired. You know, people complain a lot of fatigue when they're low in vitamin B12. They can't concentrate, so that's also a sign of depression. And then, of course, they have mood changes if they are low in vitamin B12. Many of us, actually, whether or not we're vegetarians or meat eaters, are low in vitamin B12. And so it's a very important one to replace. So you may want to have that checked as well when you go to see your primary care doctor. And iron. Iron deficiency anemia is also a culprit with depression, tiredness, poor sleep, even hair loss. Sometimes you have women losing their hair, and when you check it out, they have anemia, right? And the most common cause of anemia is iron deficiency anemia. So, getting that iron replaced, to get your levels checked. I mean, if you don't want to schedule an appointment to see the doctor, these things are still available at the pharmacy. You could buy iron, you can buy vitamin B12, you can buy vitamin D, pick it up at the store, even if you don't want to see your physician. But sometimes it's helpful to talk to your primary care because they may even choose to check other things, you know. Even something like your thyroid might be something that needs to be checked too. So having a problems with your thyroid can cause a depression, and that's something that you may need a prescription medication for. If you are having problems with your thyroid, you're going to need a prescription medication for that. So it's helpful to still go check with your primary care doctor and see what things you might want to get your levels checked from, and just rule out any medical issues because you know you could be sitting around kind of blaming yourself or whatever for your low mood, and it could actually be a medical issue that could be resolved. So you want to do the best you can to look into all the different areas that you can. Okay, so thyroid problems can cause people to feel foggy, they can cause you to feel sluggish, just not be able to focus, and you can look really depressed. Now, again, you can have, you know, the thyroid medication prescribed and still feel depressed, but at least if you know you're taking it, you know that you're doing the best you can and making sure you're doing as much as you can to address the depression. So, if you have had the medical workup and you've ruled out medical problems, the next step is to get an assessment from a mental health provider. So that could be a psychiatrist, that could be a psychologist, it could be a therapist, and they can help to assess whether or not you have a seasonal depression. Okay. And then once they assess that, they will have some recommendations for you. Now, one of the things that they may recommend is that you start individual therapy. So that could be weekly therapy, could be biweekly therapy. But therapy can be helpful for seasonal depression because they can guide you through things that you can do or ways that you can change how you think about things. Because remember, depression affects your thoughts. Depression kind of tends to make us pessimistic and negative, and a therapist can help to guide you through that pessimism that depression tends to bring up. The other thing that I have personally recommended as a psychiatrist working with people that have seasonal depression, I've recommended light therapy, which makes sense, right? Because a lot of seasonal depression is has to do with daylight and the lack of daylight. Okay? So I have recommended light therapy. And there is a specific type of light therapy lamp that you can purchase to at least help to reduce the effects of the decreased daylight in the winter. Okay, so when you look for a light therapy lamp, there are certain specifications that you should look for. Because I remember recommending it to a patient once, and I was looking through, Amazon and all these other places for light therapy lamps, and there are so many on the market, and many of them do not actually meet the specifications required to be a true light therapy treatment. A proper light therapy lamp is a bit expensive. Okay, it's a bit expensive. The good quality ones are a bit expensive. Um, but here's the main thing about it. It needs to have a certain amount of, a certain kind of light emission, and it's 10,000 lux. That's LUX, lux. 10,000 lux of light that's emitted from this light therapy lamp. And of course, you should try to reduce UV, ultraviolet emissions, as much as possible. And so to get a light therapy lamp that has this 10,000 lux specification, sometimes a bit tricky. And also, it works better if the lamp is a certain size, because if it's too small, then it may not have the same effect than if it's a bit bigger. And then you have to decide if you want a tabletop lamp or a floor standing lamp. There's all these different kinds. Um, and you can look at those, you're out there. But a light therapy lamp can be very, very helpful, especially since the daylight is one of the issues that's affecting your biology. Okay. And then when you use it, the recommendation is for it to be used in the morning. It's kind of ideally to be used in the morning, maybe for 15, 30 minutes even, and for it to be about 16 to 24 inches away, and that it should be pointed at your face, but of course, you don't want to be blinded by it, so you don't want to look directly into the light, but it should be definitely kind of shining into your face from a distance. And if you do that on a consistent basis, it may help to regulate your melatonin and serotonin and all these other things that have been affected by the short daylight. And it really does work for some people. Nothing is 100%, nothing's 100%, but it can be really, really helpful. And again, just adding these little things can help to boost all your overall efforts. So maybe you're replacing your nutrition and you're adding this light therapy lamp. The two things together may kind of be, I guess, what you might call synergistic. They kind of add up to create a more potent effect, something that's more helpful. Also, they recommend to not try to use other types of light therapy lamp substitutes. So don't use a lamp that's designed to treat skin conditions, for example. Because sometimes, if somebody has a skin condition, they have a certain kind of lamp they're using to shine on that skin condition. You can't use that lamp for light therapy because those lamps have a different specification. So they're not appropriate. But this one is designed to have low UV and 10,000 lux, and you can research that on the internet. Light therapy lamps are a top choice for winter depression, for seasonal depression. And as much as possible, try to get natural light. That can be challenging if you are working inside, like me, like myself. I'm always at my laptop. I'm always in an office somewhere. So it's sometimes difficult to get a lot of natural light. But wherever you can, open the blinds in your house. to let in as much natural light as possible. Maybe even try making your living environment a little bit more bright and cheerful where possible to reduce the gloominess that winter brings and the cold kind of isolation that can happen. So try to do what you can to actually change your environment to be brighter and to let more light in from the outside. Then, as I mentioned earlier, try not to isolate. Try to force yourself to socialize with people. And these days, it may be virtual participation or video call, but I would say make it a priority, write it into your schedule, make yourself do it, because one of the best antidepressants is being around other people, but people that you care about. Of course, select carefully who it is that you want to be around. Nobody's asking you to be around somebody that you don't like because that would not be good for your mood. So choose to be around people who make you laugh and people who have your back and people who are positive. Okay. Then there are certain medications that can help with seasonal depression. Okay. How do you know if you might need a medication? Well, if you've tried some of the other things and they're not enough, right? You've met with your primary care, you've gotten your nutrition up to par, you're eating healthily, you're exercising, you're doing light therapy, you're socializing, you're trying everything, and it's just not enough, right? That may mean it's time to try a medication. But also, if you've reached a point where things start to feel meaningless, if you're starting to feel hopeless, if you feel like, why bother? Why bother trying? Why bother even being around? If you're at a point where you're contemplating whether you're a burden to other people and if people would be better off without you, you know, it's time to consider medication. It means that your depression is more severe. It's no longer, it's not a mild thing at that point. And so those are some of the indications that it is time to consider medication. And your primary care doctor can prescribe something for depression for you just because it's easier to get in with them than to get in with a new psychiatrist. So they can start something for you. And then after that, you want to get in to see a specialist because that person then would continue the kind of the maintenance work, the continued assessment to see what they would want you to continue to take when it's time to discontinue the medication. How long do you need to be on it? That sort of thing. Are you on the right dose? So maybe start with your primary care doctor who can prescribe and then move on to a specialist. So, if you guys are just joining, you're listening to Black Mental Health Matters. I'm Dr. Carryann Williams, and today I'm talking about seasonal depression. If you want to participate in today's show, you can go to Facebook, to the Facebook page of heat981fm.com, or to my Facebook page at Dr. Carryann, drkerryann, and just we can watch the video there, drop a comment, and I'll get that. This is a pre-recorded show, so you won't be able to call in today. So we talked a little bit about how to recognize signs of depression in the winter, but also we spoke about the causes of depression, which a lot of it comes down to daylight and how daylight can actually help to regulate our body systems in different ways. And when our body systems are thrown off, one of the number one things that happens is a change in mood, irritability, depression, anxiety, that sort of thing, sleep problems, energy changes. And so then we spoke a little bit about what can we do about it. Get your health checked up, get a light therapy lamp, consider medication, consider therapy with a licensed professional. Okay. Now, I also did a show on the beginning of the year, the first Sunday in January, and it was on my top 15 ways to boost your mental health in 2021. So I would encourage you to go back and check out that first show of the year. Go to my website at drkerryann.net and click on past shows. Or you can also go to my YouTube channel, which is Dr. Carryann, and I posted the video there. I don't have very many things posted on that channel, but I did post a video there, and you can see the top 15. And these are not, big heavy hitter 15 things, though a few of them would require a bit more effort. Most of them are small things that you can do. You can incorporate in your week or in your month that will help to just boost your mood a little bit. And again, going back to that same word, synergistic, sometimes if you do multiple things together, they can create a powerful kind of antidepressant effect. But just by themselves, it's not strong enough, you know? So trying to do every little bit helps, right? So go and look at that show. There are a lot of great tips that I have there, small things and some big things. You know, music, nutrition, even comedy can help to boost your mood. So check those things out. And now, in addition to some of the things that I mentioned in my top 15, I wanted to talk about today the power of writing or journaling, because that was not in my top 15, but I wanted to talk about it a little bit today. Writing or journaling can also really help you this season. Particularly with seasonal depression, and particularly because person usually is inside, they're isolating, they're trying to stay warm. You can be inside and you can journal or write. And there are a lot of benefits to journaling. So I would really encourage that. Journaling facilitates self expression. So it's a way of getting everything out on paper, and it can help with problem solving. Okay. So, guys, here's the thing: when you hold on to negative thoughts and feelings and you just keep them locked up inside, it can be a very heavy burden. And that heavy burden can kind of break us down from the inside. You know, you don't want to just hold everything in like that. So writing it out or journaling can be a release. So it helps to just release that tension. And then writing can also be organizing, because when you have thoughts, they can just bounce around in your mind and feel very overwhelming and confusing. But in order to put it on paper, your brain is forced to organize feelings and kind of like a jumble of thoughts. It's forced to organize it into a verbal written form. So you have to actually kind of clear things up. It forces your brain into this process where you have to organize the information in order to get it out on paper. So it's actually a very organizing process just to write. And if you just hold on to it in your mind, that might not happen. It might just be confusing and overwhelming. So journaling can help with reducing depression. Now, sometimes people have thoughts, depressive thoughts, anxious thoughts that are almost intrusive. It kind of feels like you can't get the thoughts out of your mind. They kind of pop into your mind when you don't want them there. And journaling or writing those thoughts out can help with those intrusive thoughts that you feel like you can't manage. It can really help with that. And here's the other thing too, is that journaling can help you to keep track of your progress. So one of the things that I often run into when I'm working with patients is this sense of, well, they'll say, I can't tell if I'm getting better. I can't tell if anything is changing. And what they really mean is that they feel like nothing is changing. It's an impression, it's subjective. And what happens when I have written evidence, like maybe I've used a rating scale or some other kind of objective measurement, I can go back and I can say, hey, 3 months ago, here were the answers to the questions that I asked you. They were very different. And journaling can give up a similar perspective. You can go back to something that you wrote previously, and you can actually keep track of the ways that your thoughts and your behaviors have changed and the way that your perspective has changed, right? Having something tangible to kind of look back on can be very helpful. Now, how many of you remember, or how many of you, when you were a child or a teenager, had a journal? A lot of us did that when we were a child or teenager. We had a journal. And now, how many of you, as an adult, went back and reread some of the things that you wrote when you were a kid, right? And how many of you laughed at the things that you used to think, the things you used to say, the things that you used to worry about when you were a kid, right? And a lot of those things you used to worry about, they turned out just fine. It was really nothing to worry about. But it's interesting to get a window into how you used to think and what you used to worry about and what you used to say and do, right? You have this tangible evidence of your progress that now that you're an adult, you can see how very far you've come from when you were younger. Journaling helps with that, but even with a smaller time scale, of, okay, like an episode of depression, you can see how things were at the beginning compared to how they are now. You can even, if you're kind of self-conscious about writing, you can even try doing other kinds of writing, like song lyrics or poetry. There have been times where we have gotten like young boys who maybe they don't want to write a journal, but we can ask them to write like rap lyrics. And that rap lyrics, those are kind of like, that's like poetry, it's self-expression, and they can still get those thoughts and feelings out, and kind of get it on the page and have it organized in that way. So that's self-expression. Journaling can help you to resolve disputes, and it can help you to plan out your thoughts. What am I going to say to this person? How am I going to do this tomorrow? What are the pros and the cons? Writing it out can really be helpful with that. And remember, again, going back to the talk I had on sleep a couple of weeks ago, um, one of the things that I said that can affect sleep is overthinking at bedtime. Overthinking at bedtime. Because, of course, when you lay down to sleep, it's one of the first times that we have all day to finally have a quiet moment to kind of reflect, right? And well, if you're trying to fall asleep, reflecting on the thoughts of the day and trying to plan and all of that, that's going to affect your ability to fall asleep. So, what journaling can do is it can help you to get all those thoughts out on paper before bedtime, write it all out, plan what you're going to do, plan what you're going to say, problem solve, do all of these things, and get those thoughts out so then you can finally just get to sleep. Okay, so write it out, get organized, um, and go to bed. And then a couple other things that I wanted to mention about writing. Journaling can help you to get through an acute traumatic event, like a loss. Maybe you lost a person in your life. Sometimes writing out your thoughts and feelings and what that person meant to you, that can be very, very therapeutic. Some people have even done things like, kind of the theoretical, like writing a letter to the person that they lost, like expressing how much they meant to them and how much they miss them and this sort of thing. That can be very, very therapeutic. And guys, thinking about trauma, this pandemic has been traumatic for a lot of us. I know that some people are kind of desensitized to it now and have gotten used to the new normal, but there's still a life-threatening virus about. And the pandemic, the lockdown, the all the restrictions, all these things, all these changes have been traumatic for a lot of us. And so you can even write a pandemic journal. You can write a pandemic journal, chronicle all the things that you did during this past year, all the ways that you felt. You can look back at it in 5 years and you'll see all these things about, the great toilet paper shortage of 2020 and the mad dash for masks and face shields, and how everybody suddenly became a scientist and everybody is asking questions and using technical language and talking about how long viruses remain on surfaces. It's been a strange year, and I would encourage you to make like a pandemic journal and write about it. It's a great time to journal, actually, to get those thoughts and feelings out. So I would say journal. So, guys, depression also reduces your immunity, and this is particularly relevant in the pandemic. Um, so, during this time of the coronavirus, you want to do everything you can to boost your immunity. So, don't ignore seasonal depression. Don't ignore it. Take care of your seasonal depression using the things I mentioned: nutritional supplementation, light therapy, um, and regular individual therapy as well. All of these things can help. What have you guys done in the past to help with your seasonal depression? I'd be curious to know that. You can drop a comment on Facebook and let me know. There's so many kind of really interesting things that I know people have done in the past. One thing that I guess is not for everyone, but some people find helpful is learning a new language. So if you download a free app like Duolingo and try to learn a new language, that can actually do a few things for us. One is learning a new language is a distraction. It's a mental distraction, but it's better than mindlessly, watching hours of Netflix or scrolling through the social media. It kind of like tricks you into doing something more mindfully, versus the mindless kind of surfing of the internet. But it is a great distraction. And interesting is that language learning kind of opens up our world. So a lot of times depression has a way of like shrinking our world and making everything seem smaller and more isolated. And language learning kind of expands our world a little bit and makes us think kind of more broadly about other people and other cultures. So it's a great distraction. And it can really help it creates new brain connections and new nerve pathways. And that can actually enhance your brain in a way that can have antidepressant effects. And one of the things about depression is that depression tends to make us feel bad about ourselves and about our imperfections. And language learning helps us to let go of perfectionism because we're going to make so many mistakes. And in fact, the making of the mistakes is actually part of the fun of language learning. You actually have fun making mistakes and learning from them. So, also, thinking about that depression can lower our appetite, you may want to consider trying new recipes. If you're eating all the same stuff all the time, you're going to just feel like it just all feels dull and meaningless. And so, if you try new things and maybe get people that you're living with involved in the cooking, that can help with some of the appetite effects of depression. Not 100%, but it can help to create some new motivation and give you some social support and to reduce the mindless eating of junk food. So try new recipes in the kitchen. And, given that there's a lot of social distancing going on, I know that some people have done like drives. I've heard of multiple people that will say, I just kind of went for this 1 hour drive somewhere. Going for a drive can be a way to get some sunlight, get some natural daylight, and also kind of go see new places and just clear your mind. Listen to an audiobook, listen to a podcast, listen to some music, and just kind of give yourself an emotional break. So go for a drive that can be very uplifting. So yeah, I'm curious to know what you guys have been trying to um, stay afloat this winter. I mean, have you even tried aromatherapy? I've heard that some people have looked into aromatherapy and found that helpful, particularly lavender scents can help with sleep. So let me know what worked for you. Drop a comment or send me a message on my Facebook page. And I guess I want to thank you for listening to Black Mental Health Matters today. I really enjoy talking with you guys every Sunday. And so if you want to see any of my past shows, go to my website, drkerryann.net, and click on past shows. And I would invite you to join me again next Sunday at 1 p.m. on 98.1 FM, The Urban Heat, for the next show on Black Mental Health Matters. So take care until then.